All right, welcome back everybody to McGraw Commercial Properties update. Today we're featuring folks from our industrial sector. In my upper left-hand corner, we have Dilon Argo, and the bottom of the Hollywood Squares here, we have Warren Stewart. I'm Dailey with McGraw Commercial Properties again. Thanks for tuning in again. Today we wanted to feature industrial. We've done multifamily, we've done property management, we've done retail, office, and couldn't leave out the industrial sector. Guys, today run through the questions as we've done in the past. Let's talk about the economy as a whole and get specialized, and then we'll kind of talk about the brokerage end towards the end of the interview. But the question you guys are getting probably most often is very general, is what are you seeing out there? So let's try to break that down. Who's making it? Who's not making it right now? What industries are doing better than others?
As far as the industrial market goes, I think it's been fairly positive. A lot of the tenants were deemed essential. And so, I think there was a period of time when this whole COVID virus took off. There was a lot of uncertainty. So people were a little worried about moving forward with things. And then, after it calmed down a little bit, it didn't jump back to where it was immediately. But, within a couple of weeks, people were still out looking around, needing to lease space. And so I don't think it affected the industrial tenants quite as much as some of the others, because they are, most of them, essential.
And so as for reference, if you're watching this online somewhere, we're located in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and currently our industrial market, you guys can back me up on this, is probably north of 95% occupied. Would that be correct?
That's pretty much correct, yeah.
Yeah, so Oklahoma historically been an oil and gas city, manufacturing things regarding the oil and gas industry, pipelines, widgets, drill bits, all that kind of stuff, but have expanded beyond that. Aerospace is one.
Aerospace, yeah.
Yep, American Airlines headquarters here. So a lot of things to do with the aerospace industry. In addition, we have pumps, and I think we're the heat exchanger capital of the world. You've got Greenheck, and you've had SPX that was here. A lot of different manufacturers in that space. So, or the darling of the commercial real estate world, and certainly here in Tulsa. I think that's the case across the state. And as I've been on SIOR calls with folks around the globe, it seems to be industrial is hanging pretty tough right now. Everybody's kind of making it, and no real slowdown compared to some of the other sectors. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, I would agree with almost all of that. Talking with one of our major clients that we put into a space out the crossroads, he said that he's keeping all of his people employed because their work is really not stopped.
Right.
And they're just practicing, making safe practices, but they basically support Whirlpool. Whirlpool is obviously still running. So
right.
Their business is still booming.
So manufacturing seems to be okay. All three of us have been in the middle of deals through this entire thing. The one thing that I've seen, I haven't lost any deals. I've just had them extended. The time frame has gotten really, really long. And that's not because they had to lay a whole bunch of people off or a whole lot of people were infected. It had to be, in my experience, where these guys wanted to make sure that their backlog stayed intact, their work orders were still coming in. And so the feedback that I'm getting is going to be somewhere around the third quarter before everybody feels comfortable in making a decision. The situation I was in, they were going from a certain square footage to almost double that size because of the growth in their business. They think it's going to be okay. They don't see any slowdown necessarily yet, but third quarter seems to be the telltale sign. Have you guys been given any timeframes when some of your deals may be coming to fruition?
As you know, we do primarily industrial, but we also do some office. And in the office market, we have seen a couple of slowdowns, mainly because of bank financing, because the banks have been so busy with the SBA loans and so on that some of our clients have not been able to get approvals, get through the process of getting the approvals and so on, and maybe even getting surveys and so on. So we've seen a little slowdown in that part of it. On the industrial side, we haven't seen that much problem because they generally don't have the same situations as the office market. Is that what you think, Dilon?
Yeah, I would agree. The banks were so swamped with the the SBA and the PPP and all the different funding programs that I think, the general financing kind of got put on the back burner for a lot of these deals. And so we're getting to the end, I think, and hope of the PPP programs and all the government funding. So I don't think it should be too long before we're back.
Yeah, that seems to be the case in my discussions as well. Some people have taken them, some people haven't. I would say that most people have either tried or reached out in order to try and get a hold of those. The financing situation is key. What I think people expected is that when they started hearing that the Treasury rates were going so low that the banks would be in lockstep with that, and that's not the case. You can't go out and get a 2.5% loan right now.
That's true.
Unfortunately. So if you're dealing with a lot of times a local or regional bank, they're not going to make the loans. They're just going to sit and wait because they don't want to lock themselves into something like that. So financing rates, what we've seen right now is you could probably get something in the 4s for a good credit deal. Certainly owner occupied, good credit, good financials. Something in the low 4s to mid 4s is probably not unheard of. From an investor standpoint, depending on what your bank is, or if you're going life insurance company route, alternative type financing, you're still in that same ballpark. I think you would have to go to a larger regional bank in order to get that deal done. Local guys are going to probably put the pause button on unless it's a slam dunk. 100% financing, 90% financing, those things are really going to be pinched at the moment, unless, again, case by case scenario based on the deal. So generally 20%, if not a little bit more, in order to get it to the front of the line. Have you seen any additional requirements from any lenders or anything that in particular has stalled out any other deals or anything that's helped them along?
Not so much of anything that they're requiring of the buyers. We've had a couple deals put on hold due to the accountants who were deemed non-essential due to the extension of the buyers waiting for their tax returns and getting the information to the banks. But we haven't seen much additional requirements other than just the standard bank.
Yeah, I would agree. And Dylan's right. The other part of that is the IRS has been really backed up because of PPE and all the other things that they're doing. That a lot of the tax complications have increased for some of the clients.
Yeah, I think what you'll end up seeing is that there's a lot of opportunistic capital on the sidelines, waiting for this to kind of play out, piecing together information from other industries. Once public companies start calling in, second quarter numbers, so the end of June, first part of July, they start reporting. People aren't making their numbers, stock prices start to come down, then the real estate starts unfolding, probably, I'm going to guess, in the third to fourth quarter. But getting due diligence done right now is tough. You would have to know a specific, have a guy or have a girl in that particular market that you could call on, because in general, it's tough to do a lot of your due diligence right now. Inspections, surveys. If you're doing construction projects, ideally right now would be a great time to do construction projects, especially if you have furloughed workers or anything like that, to get stuff done, to not interrupt business. But if you have to pull permits, who do you file them with, right? Because the permit office is running on a skeleton crew, if at all. So that's kind of a backlog in that regards. That might be a stifling event to prevent some progress there. How do you see the industrial environment changing here locally? Do you think there's any businesses that are phasing out and new ones are popping up? Do you see an evolution of square footage utilization? Is there any one type of industry that's coming out better than others?
I don't know that there is any one particular segment of the industrial market that is just light years ahead of any of the others. But being in Tulsa, we need more warehouse square footage. I think we're almost to the point where there's not enough space, which I think it's a good problem to have. It's hard to find certain requirements from time to time.
No, I totally agree with that. Our market is very limited as far as availability, but on the plus side of that is we do see a lot of people out there who want space. I mean, we could lease a lot of space right now if we had the properties available. I can tell you a number of times that we receive calls that we have to tell them, well, there's nothing out there for you, for what you want. There's really nothing out there right now.
What's the most popular
That's
size
disappointing.
request right now? Speaking of that.
Um, I'd break it into two different categories, marijuana being one of them.
Right. And then everybody else.
Yeah. So the requirement for the medical marijuana guys who are still calling on a daily basis, they're as low as 1,500 square feet up to, 6,000-7,000. There are some that are looking much larger, but they're few and far between from what I've seen.
Yeah.
And then everybody else, all the small businesses in Tulsa, people who have been leasing for years, they're ready to go buy something.
Right.
Real estate being very affordable here, 5 to 10,000 square feet. A couple overhead doors and a lot to park some trailers.
Right.
That's
Yeah. That's, we represent a few different projects that range from, like you said, 1,250 square feet on the small side up to a few thousand square feet. Those seem to be just 100% occupied or very close to it all the time. That is a very popular size. It has been for years. And so that's if you had a complex like that, like the one we have 42nd, 60,000 square feet of small shop space, and you have a large overhead door, small office, and those things get used by small manufacturing companies. You have lawnmowers, you have plumbers, you have all sorts of different service industries that occupy those types of spaces.
Yeah, distribution centers, small distribution centers and so on.
Yep,
Yeah.
those are very popular. And then in Tulsa, we have kind of a break in history where we had a lot of manufacturing. That new product was delivered in probably the 70s up into early 80s. Then we had an oil embargo, decimated really the local economy through the 80s. And so nothing really got built. Coming back into early 90s, new stuff was happening. So there's a gap. And you have some functional obsolescence. So that's a term that we would say applied to warehouses with lower clearance height or lower power requirements. Now you're seeing warehouses, the new product that's being developed, upwards of 35 plus square feet in height. Racking systems are more sophisticated. Forklifts are more sophisticated. And there seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, seems to be a shift from that older product to the newer product.
Absolutely.
Right. So you might pay a higher price per square foot. You might be at $4 or $5 a square foot to go into 6 or 7. But if you can stack vertically, you're arguably reducing your footprint, and it may be a wash, or you may actually have some more intrinsic value coming out in that regard.
Totally agree.
What is your prediction for things smoothing back out and back to green flag racing? What would be the time frame that you would see that everything would be back to normal?
Probably fourth quarter. I will say that we've talked to a couple of landlords about this time and about the rent payments and so on. Have any of them been delayed? And surprisingly enough, the answer is no. They're pretty much getting their rent payments from everyone.
Right.
Even though some of them, they say, are hurting. I mean, as far as financially,
Right.
They are paying their rent. So that's kind of encouraging. I think that has a lot to do with the Tulsa economy and the people here, because they believe it's going to come around.
And the couple landlords that we have talked to who have offered discounted rent, it wasn't because the tenants came running and said, we need discounted rent during this time. It was just a courteous gesture from the landlord saying, look, you've been with me for a long time. I know this is tough. Let's just work together for 2 months and get through this and get back to normal.
That's a real rarity. That's not something you see a lot happening in the marketplace, to preemptively offer a discount without the tenant asking for it. Yeah, kudos to that guy. That's a noble thing to do in a time like that, for sure.
Yes.
Are you seeing any language changes? Have the landlords given you some change in language for leases or any contracts, any changes to things we've talked about before, force majeure language, counterpart signatures, et cetera?
We haven't seen much yet.
Oh.
I think from a tenant standpoint, there will be some force majeure language extensively from now on moving forward.
Right. Yeah, buyer and tenants are going to want to make sure that pandemic and epidemic options are there in the force majeure language for sure.
I believe the subject of personal guarantees are coming up a little bit more for particularly leases. Yes.
So tell me, that's a great point, and I know we're seeing that across the board in all leasing scenarios. Have you seen any minimums or metrics or what they're looking for on a personal guarantee, or what they would take in lieu of a personal guarantee?
Most of our landlords, they want to check credit of the tenant to make
Yeah.
sure that the individual signing the personal guarantee is even worried about it, because personal guarantee is only worth so much if somebody doesn't care
Right.
about their credit, or doesn't have the moral capacity to be concerned about that. But
Right.
it gives everybody a little bit of ease of mind knowing that somebody's willing to take responsibility in the event something like this does happen.
In my experience, I think that the force majeure language, and then I think we talked about in other calls as well, the counterpart signature, whereas in the event there was immediate fear that the post office wouldn't deliver anything, and we're under contract, and we have hard earnest money on different things that are going back and forth, and who's going to deliver the mail, and if we have to send it via UPS and it's overnight and nothing's happening, how do we comply with the contract and not be in default? And so there was an immediate amendment to a contract to change not only the counterpart signature but also the force majeure language that we talked about. So now we're certainly into the digital signature age, that we can deliver stuff via email and we can accept digital signatures, and that counts as a legal document. The wet signature component over the last 2 months has kind of gone out the window. There's nobody that has required a blue ink copy of anything, and DigiSign and DocuSign and all the other platforms that allow digital signatures have really done this time a great service. Any other lease language changes that you guys have come across, or is that primarily it?
That's primarily it. We are seeing some softening of some of the requirements that title companies are having because of this. Also,
Right.
they're able to do more of it remotely, and people are really not even going to the closing table
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, and so this is forcing a lot of changes across the board. So digital transfer of information, digital data, signatures back and forth. You've got hands-free everything, types of amenities. Have you seen maybe on the manufacturing floor, have you seen any changes, or have you heard anybody talk about implementations that they're doing, the 6 foot distancing? I don't know if you can do that with a welding crew. I'm sure you probably can. Taking everybody's temperature, hand sanitizers. I'm sure nobody's cracking the whip on a whole bunch of guys welding and make sure that they're sanitizing their hands. Maybe at lunchtime, I guess. But I'm curious to see what the workflow change is.
Yeah, I think there's those pieces in place, and I think they can structure their hours if they need to, where there's a wave of people that come in for the first portion, and then they move on, and the next group comes in to try to help that. But like you said, a bunch of welders in a warehouse, they're worried about working.
Yeah, more worried about sparks than they are from viruses.
Yeah.
All right, last part of this. So we've talked economy-wide, locally, and now from the brokerage standpoint, how are you guys doing your jobs? How is it that you're able to show properties, or what's the new protocol?
Well, Dilon and I are just showing properties, period. I mean, we have really stopped that, and actually had quite a few showings during this time. But we try to do social distancing, sometimes wear a mask. We had one client that before we went to show says, well, I've been taking care of my mother. She has the virus. And we really didn't want to show that space.
Yeah.
All right. I'll unlock it, then you come later, and then I'll go back after you.
Yeah, that's right. Dylan says, we'll unlock the door and you can go in and take a look at it.
Yeah. That seems to be it. There's a couple different scenarios, right? So that's one. I'll unlock it, you go take a look, and then tell me when you're done. The nice thing about manufacturing or warehouse space is that there's generally a lot of space. So
a lot of space,
unlike a small retail area or a small office, or you're not riding in an elevator together, you're going to walk into generally a large open area, and everybody can kind of talk freely without having to be next to each other. So
exactly,
that seems to be a good one.
It is. The biggest thing is the shaking hands, everybody's hand, and that goes against everything that anybody ever tells you in sales or real estate, life in general.
I agree.
when you meet somebody.
Well, you as a former baseball player, were I'm sure that you were in the era of the elbow bump, right? So I've done more of those in the past 2 months.
Elbows and the fist bumps.
Yeah, yeah. And just carrying hand sanitizer in my back pocket. And every time that we touch something, it's almost as an icebreaker. You kind of give everybody a spritz or a squirt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So good. Different types of marketing avenues. This is one of them. We're telling everybody what's going on, and that's a very digital way to get it out. Do you foresee a lot more video tours and digital tours of properties now to help facilitate the marketing?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the digital tours is a way to weed out some of the properties that you might have wasted some time looking at. I don't think anybody makes a decision on a virtual tour.
Mm-hmm.
But you might be able to check the box that says this one's not going to work based on a virtual tour.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe save some time, get the short list down a little shorter, focus on the ones that really might work.
And fortunately or unfortunately, I think we're going to see a separation of brokerage companies depending on how they embrace this new frontier, because I think that's the way of the world. And now certainly from a health standpoint, it's almost kind of be a mandate that you have to adapt to get into it. So some of the other smaller brokerage companies that may not have a marketing department or may not have the capability of doing something like that are going to be stuck with paper flyers. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on a lot of digital tours.
Good.
Well, guys, I
Thank you.
appreciate your time today. I know you're busy. I know you've got some showings, some stuff to get to today here before the Memorial Day weekend. So once you get back after it, again, McGraw Commercial Properties, industrial specialist, Dilon, Argo, and Warren Stewart. Thank you guys for your time today. If you want to reach out to us, the phone number 918-388-9588, 918-388-9588. Website is www.mcgrawcp.com. If you have any questions for any of the guys on here, please reach out, get in touch with them. And if you have an industrial property you'd like us to take a look at, we'd like to do that as well. So until next time, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great one. Bye.
See you later.